Hey, Dr. Robertson.
Hey, Dr. Mosley, how are you?
Doing good. So we got another lesson for menu planning today.
We're going to talk about nutrition on menus today a little.
Ooh,
So,
I love the fatty stuff. All
yeah,
right.
let's go ahead and get started into this. Um, first, why do we care about nutrition on menus? I
I don't
mentioned
know.
in the I mentioned in the last slide that we started to have to put calorie information on the menus. That hasn't been that many years ago. Um, and we're required to put some nutrition information on there. And there's some reasons to get behind this. One, if you have regulars, that are eating there every day, it's good for people to understand what they're eating and if you're on a diet or if your doctor says you need special uh, restrictions, or just in general to know what you're eating to be healthy.
Well,
Um,
and that's part of the reason why so many places now have a binder full of like the nutritional information breaking it down. So if you are on like a low salt diet, you can sit there and search how much sodium's in something and items like that.
right. Another reason nutrition is important is if we're in a situation with a captive market, like here at the college, you guys pay for a meal plan. You're eating these meals. Now, for the most part, I could probably write a menu that would keep college students happy, that would be really heavy on fried food and things like good pizza and Taco Tuesday and stuff like that. Would not necessarily be very um, nutritionally balanced.
Well,
And
you need to have the options at the very least. We're still going to offer things like pizza and tacos, but that's why you see the salad and the fruit bar.
yeah, if this is the only option you have to eat is to eat at the college, I have a responsibility to give you healthy food.
Yeah.
Um, there is a strong argument to be made that the restaurant industry has contributed to the obesity problem in America, and so having nutritional information available is a good way to counteract that. Um,
I remember one big catalyst for all of this happening was a documentary called Super Size Me.
right,
Yeah. And the students may not be familiar with this because it has been a while ago.
years.
Yeah, but McDonald's used to have things called supersized fries and drinks and everything else, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, this gentleman ate McDonald's for what was it, a month?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, nothing but McDonald's for a month, and he didn't make the healthiest choices during that time either, and all sorts of health issues developed quite quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
I don't know about you, but when I was a college student, I went fast, cheap, and easy.
absolutely.
You know,
Hey, I was a Domino's pizza delivery guy. I lived off of Domino's pizza pretty much 3 meals a day for 6 months.
yeah, yeah. And it's amazing how the pants didn't fit after those 6 months.
Yeah, it's because I was taller.
Of course it was, but it can attract the people who are health conscious because you might sit there and go McDonald's. Well, they have this stigma of being unhealthy and not having these options available. But then they started offering salad shakers, and when they posted nutritional information, they were able to get the people who wanted a quick meal but didn't want to eat at McDonald's because they had a preconceived notion of what it was all about.
Well, and as a guy who is a history of dieting, I can tell you that I was a 300 pounder at one point, and in losing weight, if you're 300 pounds in my height, it's a long road to lose weight. We're talking a year or more of having to diet to get down to a healthy weight. And so if it's more than a year, there are going to be times where I'm going to have to eat fast food, where I'm going to have to eat out somewhere. I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to be traveling, and my options are going to be limited. And I can tell you, there are healthy choices on the Taco Bell menu that if where you can get meals that are more nutritionally balanced, and the Wendy's menu, or almost any restaurant, if the information is available, you can look for it. You can find those healthy options.
Well, and that's a great point where you can find it. So this brings another aspect to the menus that's kind of important, is having accessibility even to those guests who are not physically there. Some restaurants that have done a great job is a local one back in Indiana called Nine Irish Brothers. They had all the allergy information available on their website, so you could search the menu ahead of time and know exactly what you could or could not eat.
Right, because if you're making a choice on where to go, it's like, well, let's look at and see what we can find. Oh no, I can't eat there because.
Yeah. So keep your Yelp menu and all those other places that people find you up to date as best as you can.
All right, so a little bit about nutrition, and your guys are going to get an entire course on nutrition later this summer, so I'm going to stay really, really very simple with this. So talking about nutrition, very basic breakdown, or what are called macronutrients. So these are the things that you need every day in relatively large quantity. This is versus like micronutrients, which are things like vitamins, where you just need a tiny trace. But these are things you need a lot of. So carbohydrates, you need a lot of sugar, starch, those things, they provide energy. Lipids is another word for fat. And you need a certain amount of fat to be healthy. Your brain function is largely dependent on fat. Protein. So protein is present primarily in things like meat, although you can find protein in other sources. Like even in vegetarian foods, you can have proteins. It takes a little more planning. You have to come up with a balanced menu. There's a reason why rice and beans are commonly consumed together in a lot of cultures, that either one of them by themselves is incomplete with their amino acids. They don't have all the amino acids, but if you eat rice and beans together, all the amino acids are there to have a complete protein.
Yeah.
And the other thing that is a macronutrient is water. Human beings need water to survive. Micronutrients. So these are things that you need in tiny amounts. So things like vitamins, vitamin K, vitamin B. What is vitamin B? I don't know. It's something I'm supposed to eat. There are actually lots of vitamin Bs. Vitamin A, vitamin C, which you get from citrus fruit.
Oranges and citrus and lemons and things like that. Yeah. And it's important to also, on a personal level, to know how much you actually need. A lot of people will just be like, oh, you need to get a bunch of vitamin B12. Well, if you've ever taken some vitamins and you go to the bathroom and all of a sudden it's neon yellow,
your vitamins.
That's all that money just going right back out of you. So it's important to not just get the vitamins, but to get them in the right mixtures and
in the right amount.
Like that, yeah.
And then minerals are things that you get. These are environmental micronutrients you need. So things like iron. You need a little bit of iron. You need a little bit of calcium. These sorts of things. So these are.
So if you're a vegetarian, the iron can be a big issue.
It's hard to get.
Yeah, because it's typically found in meat.
Yeah, red meat. And so calories. Now calories are a measure of heat. Scientifically, a calorie is a measure of heat. It's how much, if you burn something, it's how much heat it would give off. So it's a measure of energy. So in your body, this is how much energy this food has the potential to provide for you. Now, as Western Americans, we tend to consume more calories than we burn off. And what happens if you take more in than you need? Your body stores them.
Yeah.
So what are vitamins, minerals? They provide no calories. Fats provide the most calories for their volume and mass. So a teaspoon of a fat, like whether it's olive oil or butter or whatever, is going to be around 16 calories. I think that's right. Carbohydrates and proteins provide less. Some foods are very nutrient dense. So they have lots and lots of nutrients in them. Um, let's see, what would be an example of a very nutrient-dense food? Uh,
That's what about like macadamia nuts?
oh yeah, so they're going to be very high in fat. They're going to and very high in minerals, and they're going to provide that for you. You wouldn't have to eat any of them. Trail mix. You
Yeah.
know, trail mix is designed to be very high in nutrients for its weight. Because if you're hiking, you know, if you're in a remote place hiking, you don't want to carry a lot of unnecessary stuff. You don't want to carry extra gear. You don't want to carry extra food. So you want food that is going to provide the most bang for the weight.
Yeah.
Then there are lots of things that are calorie dense food. So this is food that is going to be, you know, probably high in fat and high in carbohydrates, but not a lot of other nutrients. So one of my favorite foods fits into this category: donuts. You know, it's a
Donuts.
fried ball of dough rolled in sugar. So if you think about it, fats are high in calories, sugar's high in calories. What other nutrients are there in a donut?
Well, I mean, doesn't the fruit, if you get the jelly filling, count? I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
I'm sure. But there, you know, there's not a lot of iron and calcium in a donut.
No,
That's a
there's not.
calorie dense food. And we can have calorie dense foods on our menu. We just kind of want to balance it out. You can't you can't have an entire meal based around those sorts of things. I mean, you could. So, oh, here's what I was saying earlier: carbohydrates, 4 calories per gram, not teaspoon. So I was mistaken.
Uh,
4 calories
you
per
know, it happens. But guess what? We corrected ourselves, so it's
yeah.
okay.
So you get carbohydrates from fruits and vegetables,
Hmm.
whole grains. Whole grains are better because they also have fiber, which is necessary. It aids with digestion. Um,
Which becomes important the older you get. Just saying.
so carbohydrates, you know, so like fruits and vegetables, the carbohydrates are actually coming from the sugars that are in these fruits and vegetables.
Mhm.
And we can take those fruits and vegetables, we can puree them up, we can strain out all the mat, you know, everything but the liquid. Then we can reduce that down, and we can come up with a refined sugar, you know, that is just, it's basically just the chemical that makes up the sugar. And we've taken out all the fiber and all the other
The,
things that may be
the
good
good
for us.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, now we're left with just the refined sugar. So when you look at that white sugar, you know, that you use for baking, all the other plant material has been taken out of it. You're left with just the sugar, but it's just basically providing calories. Same thing with grain. So we start with a grain like wheat. It has fiber in the hull and it has all these other things. Well, let's bleach that. Let's take, you know, and then let's filter it out. So all that's left is just the refined part of it. So these refined grains and sugars are very high in carbohydrates. They tend not to be very high in nutrients.
Yeah, it's pretty much what they call like what is it, empty calories, or
Empty
whatever.
calories is the word that gets
Yeah,
thrown.
it doesn't really fill you up or keep you full that long. So
What, you know, one of the things about the refined grains and sugars is that without things like the fiber, which slows down digestion and aids in digestion, they pass through your body quickly. You get spikes in blood sugar, and you become hungry faster.
hmm.
So, you know, if you eat a donut, 2 hours later, you want another donut. Or if you're like me, 10 minutes later.
I was gonna say 2 hours, Robbie. I don't know. I'm already hungry for donuts just talking
I
about
love donuts.
them. Yeah.
And, you know, the last point here, this is coming from the, you know, USDA recommended daily allowance of what you should consume is around 45 to 65% of your calories from
Okay.
carbohydrates. There's a wide variation depending on, you know, there are lots of diets where these numbers are very different. Um, you know, some people will get more. Actually, the average American probably gets more of their calories from carbohydrates than this. But Matt, what if you were eating keto? How much, you know, what percentage of your calories should be from carbohydrates?
Oh, percentage of calories? Not even close. I think it's 5%, 5 to 10.
5%, which
Yeah.
is essentially just trace amounts.
Yeah. And you know, it's so if you happen to be diabetic or something like that, that's where the alternative um, eating lifestyles come into play, such as keto, where it's more focused on fat keeping you full than the
refined sugars.
yeah. So I haven't had sugar in 2 years now, so 2.5.
Yeah. So lipids are fats. These are more calorie dense, more than twice as many calories for their weight than, say, sugar or protein. So 9 calories per gram. Things like fats and oils and cholesterol, these are all basically different variations of the same idea of lipids. And we have different types of cholesterol. We have high density cholesterol and low density cholesterol. Matt, do you know which one's good for you?
Yeah, you want to have the high density cholesterol. HDL is the number that is better for you than the low density.
Yeah. The
And
low density is one.
yeah, it's going to be the one that's going to clog up your arteries. Is
Right.
the LDL. Arteries are the thing in your heart that you definitely don't want to have surgery on.
Yeah. And then we have different types of fats, monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. This has to do with the chemical makeup of the fat. But sometimes we will take fats and we'll do things to them like, I want to take this oil right here, but I want to come up with a cheap alternative for butter. So is there a way I can take this oil and make it into a solid at room temperature? And this is where you get things like saturated fats and trans fats, where we chemically alter the fat to get a different physical property. But it turns out these things aren't really good for us.
That's just shocking. No, it's not. But yes, it's one of those things that you definitely have to sit there and monitor.
For the most part,
butter tastes better anyways.
Yeah, it's for the most part, if it's solid at room temperature, it's probably not good for you. That's a very broad rule. I mean, there are exceptions and everything, but like meat fats and trans fats are bad for you, and you should avoid. Let's see. And the guidelines for this are you should about 20 to 35% of your calories from fat with no more than 10% from saturated sources. This can be a challenge because fatty foods are dense with calories, and so they have a surprising amount of calories in them. Protein, again, most commonly from animal sources, but also available in vegetable sources. 4 calories per gram, made from amino acids. There are 9 essential amino acids that are required to make a protein. And this was why I said that we eat beans and rice together. Beans have like 6 of the amino acids. Rice has like 6 of the amino acids. But neither one of them, if you ate them on their own, you would actually eventually die of malnutrition. But you eat them together and you're healthy. So what we're looking for are complete proteins.
Yeah.
Where all the amino acids are present. And the guideline is about 10 to 30% of your calories from protein. And the guideline also recommends choosing lean proteins. So it's probably better for you to eat something that's lower in fat, like a pork tenderloin or a pork loin, than it is to eat a pork belly, also known as bacon.
The bacon is so tasty.
Just general guidelines. Water. Water has no calories. You have to have it or you're going to die.
You can live longer without food than you can live without water.
Yeah, I think it's about 3 days with no water and you die.
Yeah.
And
we're not talking about the water from beer, are we? Because,
water's water, man.
Okay, just making sure, especially if you're drinking like Bud Light, it's just mainly water anyways.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, 8 ounces glasses of water a day. And
this is a very general guideline. This 8 ounces of water a day. There is no science to back this up, but this is generally accepted.
Yeah.
Let's see, vitamins and minerals. These are the things that we need for our body to function. Some are soluble in fat and some are soluble in water. So like Matt was saying, if you take too much vitamin C, you just pee it out. It's a water-soluble vitamin. Vitamin K, I think that's the one that's in your liver, is fat-soluble, and so it's stored in your liver. How do we get the most minerals and vitamins in our food? Because we need them. Use fresh ingredients. Fresh these are chemical compounds. They break down. The fresher your food is, the more nutritional value is going to be retained in it. Don't overcook your food. So things like green beans or asparagus, they're best when they're lightly steamed. They're going to have more nutritional value than if you cook them to mush. If you cook them to mush, there's going to be the vitamins in them are going to start breaking down.
Well, and they're just not going to taste good either. So,
right.
Fresh asparagus tastes way better than most store-bought asparagus. So,
one of the things that was one of the most surprising things was like a really fresh potato, like pick it out of the ground and cook it, is amazingly delicious. And I love potatoes like French fries, but a fresh potato was a revelation. Yeah. Calcium and vitamin D. We get these usually from sources, most commonly from milk, but they're also are dairy sources. But also you can get it from fish and dark leafy greens or some food that is calcium fortified. Like you can get calcium fortified orange juice. If you don't get enough of this, you get weak bones. If you want to be the little old person who's bent over and all, huddled over, that's from bone degeneration. So you get calcium from dairy sources. The vitamin D made by your body if you're exposed to sunlight. So you need to get out there in the sun, son.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, go out in your backyard and, mow it and get yourself a good dose of vitamin D.
Sodium. Sodium is salt. Or, that's what we think of as salt. There are lots of different chemicals that are technically salts, but when we talk about salt in food, we're talking about sodium chloride. And it's present in everything. We are human beings. We like salt. It makes food taste better. It enhances flavor of things. We just like it. The amount of salt we consume is so much more than we need. And for most Americans, we would be healthier if we consumed less salt. And if you have a problem with high blood pressure, salt is an aggravating factor.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie. I judge people when I go out to eat with them. If they put salt on something before even tasting it, I just can't. I can't deal with it.
Well, they're just bad people.
They are. They're the worst.
Iron. If you don't have enough iron, you have anemia, which means you bleed easily.
Oh, that's not the Tool album? Okay. just checking.
And so where do you get iron? Meats, particularly red meat, but also poultry and seafood. Green leafy vegetables like spinach. Legumes. You know what a legume is?
Legume is a bean.
Or a pea.
Yeah, pea. Yeah.
And then you can get food that is iron fortified. So those are good sources of iron. Folate also from green leafy vegetables. Other B vitamins like B12 only come from animal products. So like if you're a vegetarian, you're probably going to need a B12 supplement.
Yeah, and really the other B11 and through 1, who needs those? I mean, really.
Yeah.
Wait, some of us do.
Fiber. We talked about fiber briefly. So fiber is an indigestible part of your food, usually from fruits and vegetables. It's the part that can't be broken down in your body. Your body can't digest it. So what does it do? It pushes it through. So this is important because that action of this food, indigestible food that gets pushed through, this is more or less, let's see how to put this delicately. Keeping things moving along as they're supposed to.
Move along.
Yeah.
Move along. But seriously, it's one of those things that it will make you feel full longer.
Right.
And it helps with your blood sugar, as it mentions here, reduce your risk of colon cancer, type 2 diabetes. And we can sneakily add it in. I mean, anytime I get wings, they sneak in some fiber by giving me celery. So.
Yeah. And there are celery supplements not celery. Fiber supplements you can take as well.
Yeah.
Alcohol. Alcohol is not an essential nutrient.
That's it, man. If we're going to be talking this type of nonsense, but seriously, it's not essential. And it's just mainly empty calories is the problem.
And it's pretty calorie dense, So sugar is 4 calories per gram. Alcohol is 7 calories per gram, almost twice as much. Excess consumption can lead to a number of health problems.
Shocking.
Well, yeah. And it's generally considered safe for women to have about 1 drink per day and men to have 2, generally.
Yeah.
So, what makes a good diet? It should be balanced. You want a combination of macro and micronutrients. You don't eat just one thing. You don't, you always hear about the kid that eats nothing but chicken fingers and tater tots. And, that kid is going to have a host of nutrition-related diseases when they get older. You want a diet that's varied. You want foods from many different sources, many different types of food, so that you get all the different nutrients you need. Adequate, making sure that you're eating enough. Moderate, making sure that you are consuming things that are healthy for you. In America, we eat too much. We make big portions, and we like to eat big portions. So
it's weird when places are judged more on the size of the portions than the quality of the food.
Yeah. And so in order to fit with this kind of diet paradigm, what you want to do is eat more fresh fruits, more vegetables, more peas and beans, and more whole grains. You want to use these when you're designing your menu. Other thing to think about with the menu when we're talking about nutrition is allergens. So some common allergens: fish and shellfish, berries, peanuts or tree nuts, eggs, soy, and wheat.
Well, and this is one of the things that's really kind of easy for you to get the information available. Not having the allergens known by your staff can be a problem sometimes, especially
Well, a peanut allergy is a good example of this because, okay, so someone comes in and orders a dish, and the server's going to know not to give them something that says peanut. You're not going to get the dish that you're not going to get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But what about something that's fried? Well, is it fried in peanut oil?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't know if it's fried in peanut oil or not. And so, that's the way that allergens that we need to think about when we're designing a menu. Because I love using peanut oil to fry because as a high smoke point. But I have to be very cognizant of that when I'm designing a menu when I'm thinking about people with allergies.
Yeah.
So what do we do for guests with allergies? One,
we kick them out, right?
Yeah. No, there are no secret ingredients, period. None. I mean, make any time there's an allergen listed on the menu so that people can be aware of what they're ordering. If you have dishes that have common allergens on it, indicate that on the menu. People, like if you go to a restaurant and you order chicken satay. Now, I love chicken satay, but the red curry sauce in chicken satay is a peanut sauce. And so it should be indicated on the menu.
And I found out the hard way that there's a lot of sauces in some Asian foods that have shellfish in them. So,
because fish sauce is used instead of salt in a lot of Asian cooking.
Yeah.
And the fish sauce is made with fish and shellfish.
Yeah.
Other things that are important when we're dealing with guests with allergies, tell them the truth. There are no secret ingredients. Be upfront, share the information. If a dish can't be modified to accommodate the guests, let them know.
Yeah.
When I was working at Sea Island, we had a guest who would come there every year, and I was working in the bake shop, and he would order dessert, and he was allergic to wheat, dairy, and eggs.
Huh.
That was always a challenge to try and come up with a dessert. But yeah, he had
dairy and eggs. That's
and wheat.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
There were a lot of fruit compotes and stuff that he got because that was about it.
Yeah.
So we also have to put safety warnings on our menu. So if you go, if you want to order a sunny side up egg, you can. But the menu has to say consumption of undercooked food is potentially hazardous. You're required by law to do that.
Well, same thing with hamburgers.
Yeah, people can, your guests have the freedom to make these choices, even if they're bad choices, but they have to be informed. Now, You can have a policy that says, I'm not going to cook a rare hamburger. But, your guests can, if they request a rare hamburger and it's your policy that you will cook them one, then they have to be educated. You have to have a warning on the menu.
Yeah, and really, sometimes this just gets skirted with people going, well, it's our policy. We don't cook it below medium
Right.
well.
And that's a good policy.
Yeah, it really, if somebody knows how to actually cook a hamburger properly, medium well is still juicy and tasty.
Yeah.
It's well done where you start to go.
So, just general healthy guidelines for a menu. We want to focus on fresh fruits, vegetables, grains, and B's and P's.
Mm-hmm.
We want to keep meat portions, protein portions, down to around 4 ounces, which is about the size of a deck of playing cards. This is the recommendation. So think about, I said that in America we tend to have portions that are too large. When you go out to order a steak, you don't get the steak that's the size of a deck of playing cards. That's not the way we do it here.
Well, I mean, if the playing cards is stacked like this tall,
yeah,
right?
Serving guidelines: about half a cup of grains or vegetables. Encourage salting things at the end so that the salt is more apparent. And use herbs and spices and acid to boost flavor instead of salt and fat.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like, the healthy stuff, you offer it on there, but if you write the description good enough, people aren't going to realize that some things are healthy for them anymore.
Yeah. We have a lot of people who are vegetarian and vegetarian eating their getting their food primarily from animal or from non-animal sources. Vegan getting their food in a way that no animals are harmed. And there's kind of a spectrum because there are people like pesco vegetarians who eat seafood. It's like, well, I'm a vegetarian, but I'll also eat shrimp and fish. Well, technically, you're a pesco vegetarian. That's very common. We have lacto-ovo vegetarians. These are people who eat dairy and eggs. Because we're kind of on this sliding scale. It's like, well, the milk industry harms the cow, so we shouldn't drink that. But then but the milk is also not really, the milk itself doesn't harm the cow, and the egg is unfertilized, so it doesn't harm the chicken, but so we've kind of got this spectrum here. Yeah. Vegans go all out. It's like, I'm not going to eat anything that has anything to do with an animal.
And you'll know if somebody's a vegan. It's the same with CrossFitters.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's
hey, Matt,
increasingly hard. Yeah.
When you go to a party, how can you tell if someone in the room is a vegetarian?
They'll let you know.
Yeah, don't worry, they'll tell you.
Yeah. No. You'll find out a couple of times. But they get all their proteins that they need through a combination of nuts, grains, legumes, because otherwise which legume is it that's almost a complete protein? It's got 23 of the 24, right?
I know. Quinoa is the grain that is a complete protein.
And you need to have that nice mixture going on, and really variety is the spice of life. Anyways.
And the thing, we have to have this combination so they get complete proteins for health. Because if you want to meet a really unhealthy person, find a vegan that eats Doritos primarily.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Low fun diets. Oh, I mean low fat diets. Yes. Lean cuts. So, like you said, no pork belly or bacon.
Low fat cooking techniques, so nothing's fried. You want to use things that are strongly flavored. So if you're doing low fat, this is where you start adding hot peppers and things to really increase the flavor profile, because most things that are flavor components are actually fat soluble. And when you take the fat out, that means you cannot perceive the flavor as much. Yeah. So you have to crank up the flavor. The guidelines for low fat is less than 3 grams of fat per 100 grams of food, or 30% or less of the calories from fat.
Yeah, and typically you're going to sit there and you're going to highlight these options on your menu. Some places will call them heart healthy or whatever.
Right.
You know, the catchphrase at the time is what they're probably going to label them as.
Yep. Low sodium diets. So again, I had mentioned earlier that salt can be bad for you, especially if you have high blood pressure. So a lot of people have to consume low sodium diet. So how do we do this? Well, one, we add a lot of spices and herbs to increase the flavor. So you add more fresh thyme, you add more fresh basil, things like that to crank up the flavor because those don't have fat. You add acid because acid is one of those things that will create a counterpoint and make you perceive flavor more. So you put a squeeze of lemon juice in it instead of salt. You use what are called glutamate-rich foods. So glutamate is if you've ever heard of the sensation of umami, it is the taste of meatiness. So tomatoes, meat, mushrooms are all rich in glutamate. So this is an intense flavor that doesn't have fat. And the guidelines are 140 milligrams or less of sodium per 100 grams of food, which is a tiny, tiny amount of salt. Let's see, a gram would be the weight of a paperclip. So here we're looking at about a seventh the weight of a paperclip in your meal. Tiny amount of salt. Low carb diets, higher on protein and fat. You can have low carb vegetables. And again,
broccoli, your cauliflower, all that good stuff.
Yeah. What are some vegetables that you can't have?
Carrots, potatoes. I mean, the things that have higher in starch typically, because the starches turn into sugars, which is part of the whole low carb thing. Yeah.
Diabetic friendly diets, I'll let you read about that. Celiac disease and gluten intolerance. If you have a gluten intolerance or you have celiac disease, it's a serious consideration. It causes pain, it causes a lot of health problems, and it's a serious issue. Personally, anytime anyone comes in and says they have an intolerance, as a cook, I'm going to accommodate them. On a personal level, it does bug me when people get into kind of the flavor of the month on what they're eating or what makes a healthy diet or not, and people saying, "Oh, I'm not eating, I'm gluten-free." There's nothing wrong with eating gluten. Human beings have eaten it for thousands of years. It's perfectly healthy. It's a trend and a fad now not to, that will disappear in the next few years, and then people are going to say, "Well, I don't eat oranges and I'm on an orange-free diet," or whatever it's going to be. But if you have celiac disease or gluten intolerance, it's a serious consideration. And you want to avoid things that are going to have gluten, like wheat especially. Wheat has a lot of gluten. But rye, barley, oats also contain gluten.
Yeah, and it really doesn't take that much more time to be able to list these type of things. Just because something is a fad right now, just go with it, because the more accessible you are to any kind of thing, the more people that will consider you when they're trying to accommodate their different restrictions.
Right. And the gluten can show up in surprising places. So if you ever eat in an Asian restaurant, you want to be pretty careful, because wheat is used to make soy sauce. Yeah. And so the soy sauce will have gluten in it. Soy sauce is in everything. And if you have celiac disease, that can be a problem.
Yeah, that's why you go with tamari.
Lactose intolerant, people who cannot digest dairy products.
And they just don't have the stomach enzymes to help them get rid of, in a proper fashion, dairy products they consumed.
Now, and a lactose intolerance is different than a lactose allergy. So a lactose intolerant means you can't digest it. So it causes an upset stomach, a very painful, messy upset stomach, and discomfort and problems like that. But a lactose or a milk allergy, which is not uncommon, causes anaphylactic shock and causes you to die. So they're different things.
Yeah. So it's also important to know what has any dairy products in it. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people, well, just have a brain lapse and forget cheese.
Oh
I
yeah. Well, I can tell you I've worked in a lot of restaurants where the last thing we did before we put a steak on the plate was dip it in clarified butter
yes.
just to make it richer and glisten and better. And
Yeah. Yep.
okay, so that's it for nutrition. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll have chapter 3 up for you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson.
Thank you, Matt.